this is the Provoked Prawn. Join me on now as we go into a journey comparing two tiny 60% keyboards, the weirdly named Corsair K65 RGB Mini and the SteelSeries Apex Pro Mini. This is the wireless edition, but there's also a wired version available. And in this video, I'm going to be showing both keyboards in various different guises. You can see the Apex Pro Mini, for example, here, with pudding keycaps, and then I upgraded the Corsair K65 RGB Mini in a number of different ways with Corsair's PBT Double-Shot keycaps in a variety of colours. I'm also going to do a sound test later in the video, but I want to talk to you about my feelings about both keyboards, the specification differences, and the highlights and things of interest about them, because they are both, as you can see, quite different looking keyboards, yet both obviously compact 60% keyboards with a tiny form factor and a number of interesting highlights. You'll notice, for example, that the K65 RGB Mini has some really striking RGB lighting as standard. Both keyboards have double-shot keycaps and a nice design in that robust sort of setup where they'll last over time, but the K65 is almost certainly the more striking of the two straight out of the box. You can see the backplate, for example. It has a white backplate behind the keycaps that lets it really glow with that RGB, whereas I found the Apex Pro Mini kind of doesn't really show off the RGB until you do some other things to it. That is going to be a personal preference whether you care about that though, and as you can see when they're turned off they're both quite understated, although the Corsair has quite a funky spacebar. Now if you put them side by side you'll notice they're quite similar in a number of ways. They both sit at roughly the same height off the desk and they both have a very similar setup in sort of the angle of that. You'll notice that there's no adjustable feet on the K65 RGB Mini, it just has a slope on the case, whereas the SteelSeries keyboard does have flippable feet so you can adjust it. Now obviously this is the wireless versus wired. I only have the wireless version of the Apex Pro Mini, but I thought it was still worth comparing the two, and you'll notice that they both have USB-C cables, they both have detachable USB-C cables as well, so it's worth noting that. I've also done reviews on both these keyboards that I'll link to in the description if you want to find out more, but I'm also going to talk to you about the differences between these as we go through and the highlights and things of interest. Obviously these are two funky little tiny keyboards with a number of interesting highlights to them. The Apex Pro Mini has hidden features, so although the Corsair is perhaps more striking in its initial appearance, the Apex Pro Mini has some real hidden nice features under the top that you don't see. It has OmniPoint adjustable switches, for example. These are OmniPoint 2.0. They're adjustable switches that are said to be the fastest response time around. You can customize the level of actuation between 0.2mm and 3.8, which means you can set how much of a key press you need to press in order for the key to activate, which is really impressive. Also the range, you can basically choose between 37 different levels, and it's on a per key basis, so every key on the keyboard can be adjusted to change the actuation on it. If you set it to 0.2mm, which is basically just a feather touch, SteelSeries claims a 0.54 millisecond response time, so really fast keystrokes. As I said, double shot keycaps as well, so you've got that durability. Now the wireless version has both Quantum 2.0 wireless and a Bluetooth connection option as well, so you have all that going on there. The other thing of interest here is that this keyboard also has a dual layer, so you actually have a secondary layer of actions that you can set up on the keyboard, and you basically just press the SteelSeries button and then you can access extra layers. It also has dual bindings, so you can set up two bindings, so you can set two levels of actuation and then you can set a different key press for each key depending on what level you've activated at. So you can actually set a macro, for example, at the full press when you reach the bottom of the keyboard, and a single key press when you're at the top, which is pretty fascinating. Now the K65 RGB Mini by comparison out of the box isn't as interesting when you're looking at the specs in terms of what's hidden underneath. However, it is because it also has 8000 Hz polling rate, which is 8 times faster than the majority of keyboards out there, which means it responds really quickly and sends signal to your PC really fast as well, so it's very interesting in that way. It too also has some interesting setups in terms of what happens with the keys. There are secondary layers of actions in there. Now this keyboard has a variety of options of key switches. You get Cherry MX Reds, Cherry MX Speed and Cherry MX Silent options. This is the red one for comparison's sake. Also wanted to just show you just the size difference against the TKL keyboard that I usually use, the G915 TKL. Now, Cherry MX Reds are pretty much the standard for gaming. They are what most gaming keyboards have, and they have a 2mm actuation distance, and they're pretty quiet, reasonably quiet. And one of the things that I found was interesting is basically both keyboards have a very similar sound in terms of the response from the key presses, and I'll leave obviously a sound test at the end comparing the two. I've also done a video separately with literally just the sounds if you're interested. Now, the K65 RGB Mini has some interesting extra actions that you can see here, that when you press one button and then the other buttons, you can see that you can get all sorts of different actions out of them, including mouse presses and movements, which is kind of funky and very unusual. However, obviously it doesn't have the programmability and the customization of the Apex Pro Mini, which is much more interesting because of the secondary layer, the dual bindings, and the custom actuation options. Here you can see a number of shots of me using Corsair's PBT Double-Shot keycaps to really jazz up the look and feel of the K65 RGB Mini. Out of the box it looks pretty fantastic, but you can obviously really customize it. It has a standard layout in terms of with setup, so as long as you've bought the Corsair keycaps or other customizable kit, you can throw them on. I've done a similar thing with the Apex Pro Mini, where I've used SteelSeries prism caps, so these are pudding keycaps, to throw in some interest there, and obviously that then highlights the RGB from that. There's also an artisan keycap from Dwarf Factory that I purchased and threw on because I thought it would be interesting, and then the overall result is more appealing. Here you can see a quick look at the meta layer. So when you press the SteelSeries key, you'll see a number of different keys light up to let you know which ones actually have secondary actions on them, and you can program that within SteelSeries GG. Also, you'll see from other angles that now with the pudding keycaps on, it looks really fantastic, very different look and feel. Whereas the K65 RGB Mini also looks fantastic with extra keycaps. The difference is now very comparable, so if you change the keycap layout and design, you have a very comparable setup. Two vastly different keyboards. I'll leave all the specs in the description so you can find out more. And now I'm going to give you a sound test to show the difference between them. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Hope you found this video useful, interesting, hilarious, or otherwise. Take a look at these other videos that I think you might find interesting as well. And have a look at the description for links and other information you might find useful. Click that join button to see the benefits of being a member of my YouTube channel. And most importantly, have a great life.